Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. China's foreign ministry has called for a peaceful settlement of the Kashmir dispute as per the United Nations Security Council's resolutions. Speaking to reporters in Beijing, spokesperson Gang Shuang said the Security Council members are concerned about the current situation in Kashmir, which is under a curfew since August last year. He said the issue has always been on UNSC agenda and the Council should pay attention to it. The spokesperson said China's position on Kashmir is clear and will continue to play a constructive role in this regard. In India, the Punjab Assembly has passed a resolution against the Citizenship Act as protests against the disputed law continue across the country. Chief Minister Amrinder Singh announced the government would move the Supreme Court against the law. The Kerala Assembly has already passed a resolution against the law, which is being seen as anti-Muslim. Meanwhile, thousands of people have rallied in New Delhi, Kolkata and Mumbai against the law. Carrying placards, they shouted slogans against Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In New Delhi, the protest was led by Bhim Army political party leader Chandrasekhar Azad, who was arrested in December last year. Moving on to Afghanistan, where the Taliban say a peace agreement with the US could be just days away. Spokesperson Sohail Shaheen said both the sides, led by Mullah Baradar Ahmad and Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad, are working on the final details. Shaheen said the venue of the signing ceremony is among the issues being discussed. The spokesperson said details of the progress in the talks will be shared as soon. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said the Taliban had showed willingness to reduce violence. But Kabul says any deal without a complete ceasefire is unacceptable. Meanwhile, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says the US must not repeat the mistakes of the 1980s by leaving Afghanistan in haste. Speaking in Washington, Qureshi said the US should exit in a phased and orderly manner, ensuring the overall safety of the country and the region. He said Pakistan had long argued that there is no military solution to the conflict in Afghanistan. Qureshi said bringing peace to the war-torn country is a shared responsibility. He said Pakistan is playing its role, but it cannot do it alone, and urged the international community to play its role. He also cautioned that not every country in the region wants to see peace in Afghanistan. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says the Syrian government forces have killed 20 people in violation of a ceasefire in Idlib. Speaking in Istanbul, Erdogan accused Syrian President Bashar al-Assad of lies over claims the civilians killed in Idlib are terrorists. Erdogan said he will discuss the situation with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in Berlin on Sunday. Last week, Moscow and Turkey brokered a ceasefire in Idlib, but it did not take hold. The region is the last stronghold of rebels fighting the government forces since 2015. Russia has denied reports it bombed civilian targets in the de-escalation zone of Syria's Idlib province. The Ministry of Defense says there have been no military flights since January 9th ceasefire agreement. On Wednesday, 18 people were killed in what was claimed to be a Russian airstrike that hit a vegetable market. Russia's Major General Yuri Borenkov accused the rebels of violating the ceasefire. Borenkov said rebels carried out 60 attacks in Latakia, Aleppo, Idlib and Hama provinces. Meanwhile, 3 Turkish soldiers have been killed in a car bomb attack during roadside checks in the northeastern town of Suluk. Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei says the US is trying to create divisions in Iraq to trigger a civil war. Delivering the Friday sermon after 8 years, Khamenei said the Al-Quds Force are fighters without borders. He said the Al-Quds Force should be viewed as a humanitarian organization. He said Iran's missile strike on the US targets in Iraq this month delivered a slap on America's face, showing the Islamic Republic had divine support. The Supreme Leader said by killing Soleimani, the US exposed its terrorist nature. Khamenei said the UK, France and Germany cannot be trusted over the 2015 Iran nuclear deal anymore. The US-led military coalition in Iraq says 11 of its soldiers were wounded in the Iranian missile attack on its Al-Assad airbase. In a statement, the coalition said the injured were flown to Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany. US CENTCOM spokesman Captain Bill Urban said no US service members were killed in the assault on January the 8th. US President Donald Trump and the Pentagon previously said no soldier was harmed by the action. The Pentagon chief spokesman Jonathan Hoffman disputed any contradiction. Hoffman said the Pentagon learned the injuries today and shared information immediately. Iran claimed it killed 80 American soldiers in a retaliatory attack after the US assassinated Major General Qasem Soleimani. Moving on to Ukraine, where Prime Minister has submitted his resignation after an audio was leaked of him criticizing President Volodymyr Zelensky. Prime Minister Alexei Goncharuk says he resigned from the office to remove any doubts regarding his respect and trust in Zelensky. He said the audio artificially created an impression that his team didn't respect the president. Zelensky's office said it has received the letter of resignation and will consider it. The alleged recordings emerged this week from an informal December meeting between ministers and senior officials from the National Bank. Goncharuk is heard saying that Zelensky has a primitive understanding of the economy. He also called himself an economic ignoramus. Ukraine has asked the FBI in the US for help probe a suspected cyber attack by the Russian military on its energy company Burisma. It is the same company caught up in the impeachment of US President Donald Trump.
Ukraine's Interior Ministry also opened an inquiry into the possible illegal surveillance of former U.S. Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch. This comes after the U.S. Congress released the text messages as part of the impeachment proceedings against President Trump. The FBI has declined to comment on the Ukrainian request. Burisma was at the center of attempts by Trump in July to persuade Ukraine to open a corruption investigation into Joe Biden and his son Hunter. Russia has not responded to the allegations.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel has called for an arms embargo on Libya for a political solution to the conflict. Speaking at a news conference, Merkel welcomed a promise by Libya's Khalifa Haftar to respect the existing ceasefire. Merkel said everyone at Sunday's Berlin conference must agree to a weapons restraint within the UN framework. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has confirmed his presence at the conference. He said he will push foreign powers to withdraw from the country's conflict. In a joint statement, Italy and Algeria have also voiced support for a peaceful resolution to the Libyan war. Welcome back. U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Mark Milley says Washington will decide on the level of its Africa presence in 2 months. Washington has 7,000 special forces on rotation in the Sahel region, fighting militancy in joint operations with national forces. On his way to France, Milley said the military is waiting on approval from Defense Secretary Mark Esper to pull out. Earlier, Esper hinted at a withdrawal of the U.S. forces from the region under the Pentagon's National Defense Plan. He announced U.S. intention to refocus efforts on strategic competitors, China and Russia. France has pledged to press the U.S. to keep its troops in the region because of their crucial role. French far-right leader Marine Le Pen has announced her intention to run for the slot of president again. This comes as embattled President Macron faces a mass protest movement against his pension reforms. Le Pen said she will propose a grand alternative to put the country back on its feet and create national unity in her New Year's wishes. She said the greatness of her movement is to make citizens actors in political life. Le Pen, leader of the anti-immigration party, reached the final runoff in 2017 presidential elections, where she was heavily defeated by Macron. France's next presidential election will be held in 2 years. In Panama, the bodies of 6 children and a pregnant woman have been found in a mass grave in the indigenous region of Nagabe-Buglay. Police have arrested 10 members of a religious sect in connection with the murders. Authorities say prosecutors are investigating the suspects believed to have been performing exorcism. The police said they freed 15 people who had been bound and beaten with wooden sticks. Senior prosecutor Rafael Baloyes said Locals alerted police when they became suspicious.
The public ministry and the national police were able to locate a grave where 7 Panamanians, 7 indigenous people, were found that were mistreated, that were beaten and were murdered.
The Nagawe Bugle is Panama's largest indigenous group. They suffer from high rates of poverty and illiteracy. Now moving on to the US, the FBI has arrested a former Canadian Armed Forces reservist and 2 other men allegedly linked to a violent white supremacist group. Authorities say the trio were planning to attend a pro-gun rally planned for Monday in Richmond, Virginia. The Department of Justice says the 3 are members of a neo-Nazi group, the Bays, and were arrested on federal indictments. The complaint charges the 3 with transporting an automatic assault rifle and over 1,000 rounds of ammunition with intent to commit a felony. US and Canadian authorities had been tracking the men for several months. Welcome back. A second day of heavy rainfall has dampened some bushfires on Australia's east coast. The Rural Fire Service says despite the rains, 82 fires are still burning. These include 30 that are yet to be contained in New South Wales and the state of Victoria. After months of hot and dry weather driving the fires, Australia witnessed some of the heaviest rainfall in nearly a decade. Rain is expected to continue throughout the weekend in New South Wales. Authorities say millions of animals are still threatened by the bushfires. The blazes have claimed 28 lives, squashed massive tracts of forests, and destroyed thousands of homes. Chinese authorities have reported a second death from an outbreak of a new coronavirus. Health officials at the inland city of Wuhan say 5 others are in critical condition. They say there have been 41 confirmed cases of the illness since December. South Korea has heightened its response status, while the new virus spread to the parts of East Asia as well. Thailand has reported 2 cases of the virus, with authorities insisting that there was no outbreak in the country. Earlier, Japan confirmed its first case of the infection. The World Health Organization says the Japanese case is unlikely to lead to a major outbreak in the country. Cities across southern Europe are experiencing dangerously high levels of smog caused by dry, sunny weather and light winds. In Bosnia, protesters took to the streets wearing gas masks demanding government action. The Italian government has placed temporary bans on diesel vehicles in major cities, including the capital, Rome. The restrictions, which will remain in place for the next 3 days, will affect 1 million vehicles. Smog levels in Milan, Turin and Bologna have also reached dangerous levels. Environmentalists have described the situation as a smog emergency. Brazil has opened a new $100 million Antarctic base built by China's China National Electronics Import and Export Corporation. Brazil's Vice President Hamilton Mourão inaugurated the Comandante Ferraz base yesterday. This report has the details.
The new facility replaces a research station destroyed in an explosion almost 7 years ago. Brazil's 1982 Antarctic program was set back in 2012 when an explosion killed 2 officers and destroyed 70% of the building. Brazil's Science and Technology Minister Marcos Pontes says that new 4,500 square meter facility was bigger and safer.
It's great to see the capacity that we will have in scientific terms, because this will also signify the work of hundreds of researchers in Brazil and from other places on account of our cooperation, so that we can cooperate on the advancement of science and the knowledge of the planet as one.
The base can house 65 people and will be used to study microbiology, glaciers, and climate, amongst other fields.
Now the business updates. The EU says it has to assess whether the US and China Phase 1 deal complies with global trade rules. At a press conference in London, the bloc's trade commissioner Phil Hogan said the devil is in the details. Hogan said Washington and Beijing have stepped outside the usual framework for making agreements. He said Chinese companies would be forced to buy more American goods, shifting Beijing's demand away from the European companies. Under the new accord, China has promised to boost U.S. imports by $200 billion over 2 years. The U.S. and China signed a Phase 1 agreement aimed at easing an 18-month trade war that rattled global economy. China says its GDP growth in 2019 was the slowest in 3 decades. The trade war with the U.S. took its toll on the world's second-largest economy. Data released by Beijing today suggests the economy could only hit 6% growth over the past year. This rate was within the government's 6.5% target. The trade war between China and the U.S. has dented Beijing's economy, while additional U.S. tariffs slowed domestic and foreign demand. Beijing released its growth data following a trade war truce with the U.S. after the signing of the Phase 1 deal on Wednesday. Google's parent company Alphabet has hit a $1 trillion market valuation for the first time. It is the only 4th U.S. company to reach the milestone. Alphabet shares gained nearly 1% to hit the market capitalization. The Alphabet record comes after a historical change in leadership at the firm. In December, Google CEO Sundar Pichai took the top role when co-founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin stepped down. Apple was the first U.S. company to hit the $1 trillion market mark in 2018. The French central bank says the continuing transport strike has stunted economic growth. The bank's governor presented economic figures to the parliament in Paris as the national walkout entered day 43. The governor said an estimated 10% of the businesses, mainly hotels and transport, have been affected. French commerce reported turnover losses of over 50% as the transport shortage put off customers during the Christmas season. Trade unions are blocking ports and disrupting power production, pressurizing President Emmanuel Macron to scrap his pension overhaul. Electricity output was down by 9%, while ferries to Britain suffered delays. Students, teachers, lawyers and other workers have also joined the strike. The U.S. stock markets have opened at a record highs after strong global economic data and a solid start to the earnings season. Surge in shares of Cisco Systems have led to upward growth in Dow Jones Industrial Average Index. The indices of S&P 500 and Nasdaq Composite are also trading higher. Utilities and communication services were the best performing sectors in the S&P 500. Now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on